Hello and welcome back to the Final Lap podcast. My name is Josh. I'm joined, as always, by Sam. We got a lot to get to from a great race in Baku. First off, though, Sam, how are you doing, and how did you enjoy your weekend?
I'm doing great. Baku's an interesting track. Sometimes it really delivers and it's a home run race, and sometimes it really doesn't. I feel like we got a little bit of everything this weekend. So I'm excited to break it all down and kind of see where we stand from here in the championship battle.
Yeah, I said from a great race, so maybe I should have rephrased that. I think the first lap or two is very interesting, and beyond that, it was kind of a little bit of a slow race. But it did have some pretty big championship implications come from it, and really from the weekend as a whole. Before we get to all that, though, we have to get to your winner from Baku, Maximilian Verstappen, who gets his fourth win of the season. Another dominant performance from pole position for him, back-to-back weeks here where he's just put on an absolute clinic. I think that this one was pretty similar to Monza in the sense that he got out front, and then from there it was pretty straightforward. Just set the pace, set the tone for the race, and that's what he did. An excellent stint on those hards to start, and then from there it was pretty easy. I never had really any threat of an undercut or anything going wrong. A bad pit stop or a mechanical failure was about all that would stop him. Neither of those happened, so it was pretty straightforward for Max. Nice, easy one-stop victory and his second straight.
Yeah, I think first of all, another incredible drive from Max to put it on pole. But I do think that this is about as straightforward as a win as you're ever going to get in F1, just given the circumstances. I mean, with Sainz and Lawson right behind, I don't think either of those guys were really thinking that they had a real shot at the win. They were more focused on clinging onto the podium, and then the likes of Lando and Oscar and even the Ferraris a little bit further back in the field. Baku, there's some chances to pass, but it's certainly not the easiest passing track on the calendar. So I think this one, once Max put it on pole, I never really had any doubts that he was going to take it home, but still very impressive nonetheless. I mean, winning by, I believe, 19 seconds in Italy and then 14 here in Baku is it's so impressive. I do think that car's gotten a little bit better, but McLaren have been so dominant all year that to see Max come out and really just put them away these last couple races is really something special.
Yeah, like you said, the past couple races have been really special from Max, and also going off what you said, it's very straightforward once you get out front in a one-stop race like this at a place like Baku, when you also have, like you said, again, Sainz and Lawson starting behind you in a Racing Bull and a Williams. Those guys are just kind of holding on for dear life, trying to get the best result they can in cars that just aren't as good. I think pre-race, someone from Red Bull said that it might not be the easiest thing to shake Sainz because they're close in race pace. They were like 3 to 4 tenths off of what Red Bull was doing in race pace, but that's a lot in race pace. The 3 or 4 tenths a lap over the stretch of an entire run, that adds up pretty quickly. And that's kind of what we saw. It was Carlos was able to hold on, within 1, 2, 3 seconds for the first 10 or so laps, but then from there, it was just going to be Max all day in the hard tires that were able to last longer. I believe Carlos started on the mediums, which inevitably we're gonna fall off faster. So yeah, it was pretty straightforward in the sense that he didn't really have any race winning threats around him. The only thing that could stop him was himself or some outside force. And with you add on that an easy one-stop race where there's even less that can go wrong in the pits. You thought maybe there might be rain that could interject there and make it a little bit more interesting, but that never really came to pass. There were a few drops, but that was it. So it was a really straightforward race for Max. Not to take anything away, obviously it was a great drive, but straightforward for nonetheless for him.
Yeah, that's really it. It was a great drive, but not the most intensive one. I mean, obviously that's ideal. You know, all these guys would take wins going away 10, 20, 30 seconds if they could. Yeah, I think you make a great point that even 3 to 4 tenths, is a big gap in race pace. And, if even if Sainz had gotten ahead in turn one, lap one, whatever, I've no doubt that Max would have been able to catch up pretty quickly. You give him a pace advantage and, you put Max behind the wheel, he's going to get the job done. So that's why I never really had any doubt, unless someone really tried something crazy into turn one. But I knew Carlos was smart enough not to try anything there. I mean, just getting the podium and ensuring a first Williams podium of the season, first podium in a long time for them. It means a lot more than trying to send it into turn one and potentially causing an accident. So, just played the whole weekend perfectly. He did have a grand slam this weekend, so maybe we're underselling the achievement. It's still an incredible achievement. Just very, he hit all his marks and took care of business as we expect.
Yeah, and even if Carlos gets ahead into turn one, like you said, the Red Bull was pretty slippery. Yuki was able to hold up the pack for a while there and create a DRS train of his own. So with DRS, with Max, with a better car, with a little bit more pace on the straight, I think Max would have had no problem getting back by if anybody was able to get past into turn one, like you said. As far as the championship's concerned, some people on the broadcast were kind of, I think they said Stella from McLaren said that he still hasn't technically counted Max out of the championship. If you look at it now, it's down to 69 points with 7 races remaining. And that gap obviously has shrunk pretty significantly in these last 2 races with 2 Max wins and what happened to the McLarens this week. But I think it would take a lot more of what we saw this week for that to actually come to pass. Maybe Max is back to, driving the wheels off this thing. I think he was doing that all year, but with maybe a slightly improved car that's allowing him to win these races instead of, thirds and fourths. But I still don't think it would be enough, just because I don't think the McLarens are going to be this bad as consistently through the rest of the season from here on out.
No, yeah, I've seen a lot of conversations debating whether or not Max is in title contention after this race. And for me, I think we're one race too early. I think if he goes out in Singapore and we have another similar race where he wins and the McLarens are at least, maybe off the podium, then I think we can absolutely have that conversation. Because he is Max Verstappen and because the car does look a lot better these last couple races than it has in a while. But Singapore is a very different track, both to Baku and Monza. And I think, there's a chance that things revert this next race and we end up with a McLaren 1-2 or even just a slower Red Bull. So I think it's just we're one race too early. If Max comes out and wins convincingly again in Singapore at a very different style track, and the McLarens look a little slow, then I'm certainly willing to entertain that conversation because we know what Max can do as a driver. I think so far this year, even before Oscar's crash this week, I would have said that Max has been the best driver. So I don't think it's controversial to think that he can make some big comeback charge. I just need to see it one more weekend before I can really say that it's a 3-way title race, because it's still such a big gap. And, just one good weekend from the McLarens in Singapore could really put it out of reach.
Yeah, that's a great call with needing to see one more race. I agree, because we had this conversation after Monza where Max has a similar win to this. We kind of debated if it was a one race thing, just a Monza specific thing, or if it was something that would be replicable going forward. We both kind of thought it would be a Monza specific thing. Baku had, the straight line speed that you also need at Monza, but it also has a lot more intricate, middle section of the track that is, it makes it a different track than Monza, and your car needs different things. And I think we both kind of thought Max would be, good at Baku, but not this good, not like a runaway victory again. And I just think that Singapore, we had this conversation before, but Singapore is just a completely different track than the two, and it's historically a track where Red Bull has really had struggles. Red Bull and Max have had struggles. You look at Max's 2023 season and Red Bull's 2023 season. It was the only track where Red Bull did not win that year. It was, it kind of broke up a long winning streak of Verstappen. I think his 10 race winning streak ended there. And so it's going to be one that will be tricky. It's a different Red Bull car, but it's similar in a lot of ways. Maybe, obviously not as fast as those 2023 and 2024 cars, but it's and 2022, but it's going to be one that I think Red Bull and Max will struggle at, just because we've seen it historically in this generation of car, and I don't think this car is different enough to where that will be any different. They've also struggled at places like Monaco in this car, and he did not look super competitive at Monaco this year. So he's driving really good right now, and it seems like they have made adjustments to the car that have made it more likely to win. But with Singapore, it's a different animal of its own for Red Bull, and I just don't see. I'm sure he'll drive great and have a pretty solid weekend, but to make it a championship fight, he would need to win the next race. I mean, he'd probably need to win all of them, or just about all of them from here on out. And Singapore is, I'd say, the least likely of the tracks on the entire calendar for Max and Red Bull to get a win. So that'll be a very interesting challenge to watch with for Max, because if he is able to pull out, a rabbit out of the hat and win in Singapore, then I think all bets are off, like you said. But I personally don't think that that'll be the case, just with the history we've seen from Red Bull and Max there.
Yeah. Just to go back to Stella's comments that you mentioned, they asked if Max was a title threat, and he said, "Affirm yes. Can you write it in capitals?" So he seems to be. I don't know whether that's just him. He might be just trying to set expectations for the media, but he seems to think that this is a title fight. For me personally, I'm looking at Max's record at Singapore. His last three there. He was second last year, but he was fifth and seventh the 2 years before that, and those were, 21 and 22, 2 years where they were, or 22 and 23. Sorry, 2 years where they were, maybe the most dominant car in F1 history, or at least up there. So it's really a one of a kind track for them in their struggles, and that's why I just need to see it there, because, like I said, one good weekend, a McLaren 1-2. Even like a 1-3, 2-3, something like that, and Max finishes lower, in that 5-7 range, and that really, really makes it difficult to see a path forward from there. But yeah, a win, even if Lando and Oscar put in good races, a win would definitely change my view. Not only because he would gain more points, but also because then we would have seen it from the car, really at every kind of track, and even the track that they have struggled at more than any other.
Yeah, if he's able to put it in, at Singapore the way he has the past 2 weekends, or even, I don't want to say just a win, but he's dominated the past 2 weekends. So even if it's just a win by a second or two, or even if it's a solid finish, but the McLarens have another bad weekend like they had this weekend, and he, gains significant more points, that is a significant jump for him. And, being, let's say, 55 to 45 points with 6 races left is a a much bigger jump than 69 points with 7 races left. And I feel like this back half of the calendar are a lot of tracks that Max is good at as well, which is another thing that, other than Singapore, that is kind of going in his favor. It feels like if he does want to have a chance, he needs to survive Singapore, preferably in his case, gain points from the weekend on the 2 ahead. But if he can even keep it, within the margins, then maybe we can see a huge run out of him. But it's going to be really hard. I mean, it's hard to count out Max because of what we've seen, but it will be incredibly difficult no matter what for him to do it from here. I mean, I would still give him the lowest odds of any of the drivers. I still think Lando and Oscar, obviously Oscar with the lead, has a much better chance, but I think Lando would too. I think Max maybe is driving the best since the summer, coming back from the summer break, and even really probably that, race 13, 14, 15, whatever, that, that second half. But I don't think that it's, enough with the gap that he has, unless something, pretty significant happens again.
Yeah, I think he'd pretty much have to pitch a perfect game from here on out, or he'd have to be near perfect and have another DNF from Oscar or a couple really poor races. So yeah, I that's pretty much where I'm at is, get through Singapore and then go from there, because that's going to be their biggest challenge yet. And if they're up to it, then I certainly won't count Max out, but it also could be the knockout punch for both the McLaren drivers with regards to Max.
Yeah, definitely. Speaking of those McLaren drivers, they did not have a good weekend as a team, did not have a good weekend as, individual drivers. They missed out on their opportunity to close out on the Constructors' Championship. That's still going to happen. There's no doubt in that. 7 races left. It would take this weekend over and over and over again from here on in for them to not win the Constructors. And that's just not going to happen. So they will be the Constructors' champions. Didn't happen this weekend, but the bigger story is for the Driver Championship, obviously, where Oscar Piastri has the crash in Q3, a weird qualifying session. So he still ends up starting 9th, not terrible, and only 2 positions behind Lando, who also had some issues of his own in that Q3 session. It was a crazy session, though, nonetheless. And then in the race, Oscar stalls, at the start. He gets a little bit of an early jump and then tries to correct that issue and stalls. Goes all the way to the back, and then just a few quarters later crashes out of the race. 0 points for Oscar on the weekend. And then Lando doesn't have a great race either for himself, only gains 6 points on Oscar Piastri in the championship, with Oscar scoring 0. But given the championship circumstances, who do you think had the worst weekend between the two, Oscar Piastri or Lando Norris? And maybe not even technically the worst weekend, but the worst weekend just in terms of what was needed for the championship and the outcome of the championship.
I was looking at the doc, and I was just kind of struggling to answer this question, because I think it's really hard. Obviously, in a vacuum, Oscar had the worst weekend, but I think in hindsight, when you contextualize everything, it's kind of hard not to see it as a really big missed opportunity for Lando Norris. I mean, we talked all year about how Oscar has been pretty mistake-free, especially since Australia. He has just been, Mr. Consistent, dominant at times, but even when he's not dominant, consistently very good, very solid, gets the job done. And, in one race or one weekend, he crashes qualifying, like you mentioned, jumps the start, then stalls, then crashes into the wall on lap 1. I mean, every single mistake that you make over the course of a season, he effectively made in one weekend. And to have all that happen, and Lando still only gained 6 points, and this might not have been McLaren's best track, pace-wise, and I can certainly, it'd be one thing if Lando came in second, another dominant Max weekend, and Lando comes in second, but that's another 12 points on his championship total. He'd only be down 13 points right now, if my math is correct there, and that's a total game changer. I mean, 13 points, you could make that back in one weekend, or say a first and a third, then you're down to 3 points, and you're effectively effectively even there. So I think if outside of the context of the championship, it's obviously Oscar Piastri, but it's just such a missed opportunity for Lando Norris that I think when you put it in that context, I think it kind of has to be. It kind of has to be him. At least this, I think that might be how it is remembered long term, that this was maybe his biggest missed opportunity of the season.
Yeah, this could have been the weekend where we looked back on it and said this is the weekend that Oscar Piastri blew the championship in 2025. He had a great lead and a terrible weekend in Azerbaijan, and that was it. That was his confidence shattering weekend. That was the turning the turnaround part in the championship battle for 2025. And yet I think I will look back on it at the end of the year in a few years' time, if Lando's not able to win the championship, and say that this weekend was the worst. I'll look back on it and not remember that, and remember that Lando missed out on a huge opportunity to make a comeback in the championship here this weekend. If, like you said, in a vacuum, in with without the context, obviously a crash in qualifying, stalling at the start, crashing in the first couple of corners is about the worst weekend you can have. But with the context of the championship, with Lando needing, when you look back at Lando's 2 DNFs this year, Oscar got 12 and 25 points out of those 2 race weekends. So he gained 37 points in those 2 races. And if you look at this, the 1 DNF that Oscar's had, which was this weekend now, Lando only gained 6. So of the DNFs, between the 3 drivers, Oscar's a net, plus 31, which is essentially what we're looking at in the difference of the championship here. So I think that when these bad weekends have happened for Lando, Oscar has taken advantage of that with a win, and then with the 4th place in Canada, where probably wasn't their best stuff as a team, as as drivers, as whatever, but he still managed a 4th. Whereas here, another race where it's not the best stuff for the drivers, not the best car situation for the team, but Lando is only able to manage a 7th place finish. That's the kind of thing that I felt like once Oscar was out, Lando needed to get at least a top 5 today to make it, to kind of change the tide in the championship. 7th place was definitely not enough. I think he had to get to at least 5th. Preferably, it would have been a podium, just from where he started. Now, you can also go back even farther and say that Lando kind of blew it in the qualifying. It was a very difficult qualifying. It was kind of wet to dry changing on an already slick track situation. But if he's able to, not nick that barrier between coming into turn or out of turn 15, I think he is on a lap that's good enough for probably at least a 2nd or 3rd, and then he's pretty much guarantees himself a podium from there, or maybe even he's able to challenge Verstappen for the race win. So you can even go back to qualifying and say that, Oscar, yeah, he crashed in qualifying as well, and crashed out of qualifying, but Lando had a huge missed opportunity there as well. It just was like every time Oscar opened the door for Lando this weekend, Lando kind of closed that door back shut on himself. He didn't walk through the doorway. He just closed it right in his own face. And that's not what you can do when you are in this situation in the championship. You have to take full advantage of maximum points in whatever the weekend is. This weekend, that might have been a 4th, a 3rd, whatever. I get that the car wasn't the best here. But you have to take advantage of the highest level of points that you can get. And I just don't think that Lando did that this weekend.
Yeah, I think it's a 2-sided coin. I think, to be fair to Lando, I'm sure some of his fans will point out, and rightfully so, that he was kind of hard done by on the pit stops. Once again, I saw a graphic that his pit stops are about a second and a half worse than Piastri's in recent races. Once again, just another sort of mistake by the McLaren pit wall there. And if that hadn't happened, he might have ended up in fifth. He might have been able to get by Tsunoda and Lawson, who he was kind of fighting with there at the end. But by the same token, like you mentioned, if he hadn't have, kind of had that skid against the wall in qualifying, we might not have even been in that scenario. And, they mentioned on the broadcast too, I believe he lost 0.8 in the second sector to Verstappen before he even hit the wall. So I think that, he certainly he was hard done by in some categories, but there was also a lot that was in his control that he could have done better on. And, maybe he ends up, like you said, I don't think this was maybe even a winnable race for Lando, and that's fine. Not every race is going to be, but if he ends up third, fourth, even fifth, it could be a different ball game. And we're talking about a weekend where the car wasn't the best and he still maximized things, and that's just the way it goes sometimes. But instead, through a combination of maybe some things that were his fault, maybe some things that weren't, we end up in this spot right now where it seems like a missed opportunity, and that's going to be the storyline that we remember.
Yeah, that's a great point. It doesn't have to be a win. It's not, oh, he blew the weekend because he didn't win and Oscar crashed out. It's that he didn't. He could have had so much more had that qualifying lap been better. Had, like you said, the pit stop as well. That's out of his control. But I just think that there were other opportunities there too during the race. I know it's hard to pass it was hard to pass on Sunday. Just DRS trains everywhere. But I think that and I've been very supportive of Lando the past 2 years in his championship battles, but I think in the same circumstance, Verstappen would have probably, a guy like Verstappen wouldn't have finished seventh. He would have, battling for a championship in that situation. I think he would have found a way to do something different, and maybe not even Verstappen, maybe Red Bull as a team as well would have found some alternate strategy that would have, helped out in that situation. So it's not just a Lando thing. I think it's also a McLaren thing, because I feel like, they could have tried, obviously the shorter strategy going longer, a short first stint and then a longer second stint didn't work out for Leclerc. But I feel like there were opportunities to get him out in clear air. They didn't, take advantage of those opportunities. And then on top of that as well, that bad pit stop. So yeah, it's not all on Lando, but there were things that he could have done this weekend that would have resulted in a better finish for him, and that's why I think it was a worse weekend for Lando than it was for Oscar in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, I think we're kind of in the same boat here. I think it's maybe it's harsh to say that Lando had a worse weekend because he kept the car on track and at least got some points for the team. And I'm not saying he had a worse weekend without the context. It's just feels like a major missed opportunity. And, frankly, Oscar was really poor this weekend, but he was also kind of due for a weekend like this. Even the best drivers, nobody's perfect. We've seen Max DNF, Lewis DNF, all the best. They have weekends like this. So it's certainly not an excuse. It was not a good weekend for Oscar, but these are the moments that you have to seize if you're going to win a title, especially when you're in that close of a battle with.
Yeah, but that's why I think the conversation is shifting more towards Lando, because we could have been having that conversation right now of, oh, Oscar, like what's going on? You have been so consistent throughout the year. Maybe the pressure's getting too big. Maybe, the spotlight is getting to him of, maybe he's been so smooth, so confident, but like quiet confidence, but, maybe it's starting to get to him now that it's getting down to those final races. But I feel like no one's really having that conversation. Instead, we're having the conversation that Lando missed out on what was a great opportunity. So it wasn't a worse weekend in that without like in a vacuum. Obviously, Oscar had a worse weekend, but for the championship and for what was needed in this race, get after with a situation that we had, Lando could have jumped huge in the championship and just didn't. So yeah, I think we're pretty squared away on that one, and that we both think obviously Oscar, it was worse for him, but Lando in the end is kind of the storyline coming out of it with what could have been.
Yep. Yeah. Unfortunately for Lando, that's kind of where we're at, and I think that's where most people are at as well. And yeah, we'll see. I mean, I do think it's it's definitely something that was on my mind, just kind of what's going on with Oscar, just to make that many mistakes in one weekend. But he is human, and I'm sure he'll bounce back fine in Singapore. And yeah, we'll see if he does keep making those mistakes, if Lando can take advantage.
Yeah, I also thought this would be kind of a weekend where Oscar might be able to separate, because he won here last year. He had such a great race here last year. And I thought that he had that going for him as well. It could be kind of the final, the dagger there at the end for Oscar and Lando, of Oscar taking full control of the championship. So he still didn't do that. Lando still did gain points, but I think we would have just been hoping for more points for Lando to kind of even that out and bring it closer together. Move to our personal podiums now for Baku. I have Max Verstappen number one. We had a whole 20 minutes on him at the beginning, but so I don't really have much else to say other than it was another incredible race from him. And if you look at it, this season, it's been up and down. There has been some not great points for Max, but he has 4 wins. That's only one less than Lando, who's been in the best car all year. He has led more laps than Lando to this point in the season, who like I just said, has the best car this year. So it hasn't been his the year he was probably hoping for, in that he was hoping to be leading the championship at this point, but it's still been an incredible year, and this drive was no different than that. Who do you have for your number one?
So for me, I'm just gonna go with Max Verstappen. Just it's kind of very hard for me personally, when a driver has Grand Slam, not to put them number one. And it really solidifies, even if he's not going to win the championship or even really make a challenge, I think it really solidifies him as, in my opinion, the best driver this year. Always doing the most with his equipment, making the most out of what he's got. And right now he's got a good enough car to win at least a certain track. So for me, I'm sticking with Max number one.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say it right now. I'm picking Max to win Interlagos. I think that's a lock right now. Whatever else happens in the championship from here on out, that place and him, if he continues to drive like this, that just seems like a perfect match. So I think Max will get at least one more win this year, and for me, that's at least Interlagos. But there's other places he could win as well. In second place, I had Carlos Sainz. It was, a very good weekend for him after it's been kind of a rough start to his Williams career. Great quali. It was the weird session where it was kind of stopped halfway because of the red flag, and then with some changing conditions, it wasn't, optimal in that final section, although Max did put in a faster lap. But Carlos put in an early banker lap and, was able to use that to get a second place in qualifying. So, a great quality lap, and then a really good job in the race. I thought very solid race pace. wasn't able to, hold off one of the two charging Mercedes, but in a Williams, I think, to get a podium at any point wherever you start is a really, really great performance this season. I know it's an improved Williams, but still a podium in a Williams is still very, very impressive regardless. And, on top of that, it helps separate Williams even more in that constructors battle with the Racing Bulls for fifth and sixth. And I think that they're, about 30 points ahead now. So it'll take some good driving from the Racing Bulls to catch up to the Williams at this point. On top of that, with Albon, and now it seems like Sainz driving a little bit better in that Williams. So I thought Williams and Carlos, obviously, for his P3 performance, should be P2 on the personal podium.
Yeah, I'm going to join you here. I mean, just getting a Williams back on the podium, obviously they've been much better this year, so it's a little misleading, I guess. But regardless, it's just a testament to the great work that James Vowles has done with the car, with getting both Alex and Carlos, getting them in the team and keeping them locked down. I think they've done a real heck of a job there, building up. They're almost unlucky to get a podium after, a Sauber and Racing Bulls and teams like that this year. But they certainly deserved one, at least one. And I'm glad to see Carlos get it, even though I think Alex is very deserving too. Carlos has had a very up and down at best first year. Williams mostly down. So for him to come out and put in a performance like this kind of reminds everyone, why we rate him so highly, and it's a really good precursor for next year. I know new car, things will be different, but it certainly is a good reminder that he can be competitive with Albon again next year, even if he hasn't been so far this year.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I just think it was a great drive from Sainz, and it was good to see kind of a sign of life from him after it's been, like you said, up and down, but a majority of that on the down. Now he's getting a little bit of the up and the up and down year. So good to see for Carlos, and happy for that, because I think coming in, it was expected that him and Albon would be, kind of going toe for toe this year, and that just hasn't been the case results wise. But I think the pace has been there at times. He just hasn't had the results to show for it. In third, I have Liam Lawson. Similar weekend to Sainz, very similar weekend to Sainz. He wasn't able to get a podium, but finished in a solid fifth place for Racing Bulls. Just didn't have that pace in the car that Sainz had to keep it within a podium position. But he did, put up a good fight against both of the Mercedes, who were, coming through trying to get on the podium as well. So it was a really, solid race for Liam, and happy to see it for him as well, because obviously after the start of the year, getting dropped by Red Bull in the first two races, your career can go really sideways from there. But it seems like he's righted the ship, and now he is fighting, very hard with Hadjar, who, yeah, he's a rookie, but he's been a really impressive rookie this season. So it's been a good second half, really a good, I guess, second or final 2/3 of the season up to this point for Liam. And this result is, very kind of encapsulates all that.
Yeah, I think this is a great shout. I think this was a really tough weekend, kind of weekend where a tough weekend to pick the podium, I should say. Weekend where 4 or 5 different guys I really think could be on it. I think Lawson's a great shout. To switch it up a little bit, I'm going to go with the third guy that was on the actual podium, and that's George Russell. I know the Mercedes was pretty good on pace this weekend, but a lot of this pick is inspired by the fact that he was clearly under the weather all weekend, feeling ill. He said, if this was Singapore, that he wouldn't have stepped in the car, wouldn't have raced this weekend. And, he was kind of going through it all weekend. And to come out and put it in P2 at a difficult track like Baku, obviously it's difficult in different ways than the Singapore, but it's a street track. one of those tracks where you got to be on it 24/7. You can't take a moment off, or else you're crashing at the castle section, or really anywhere on this track. So just to stay on the ball, feeling under the weather, and go from P5 to P2 was very impressive. I think Lawson's a great pick as well, and those other guys as well, very deserving to be on the podium. Just to give another guy some shine, though, I'm going to go with George Russell.
Yeah, a lot of people calling him Darth George after this weekend. Some of that radio was just, it was you couldn't even tell, unrecognizable, that it was George Russell talking. I thought it was AI or some some voice messed up whatever thing that they put over his voice, but it was his actual voice. So he was very clearly not feeling well this weekend, and like you said, taxing track, and able to very mentally tough track as well. So for him to go from P5 to P2, like you said, very, very good weekend considering the circumstances.
Yeah, and I want to give a shout out to just Mercedes strategy team, because it was a great performance by George, but it wouldn't have been possible to go from P5 to P2 without some really good strategy, and help them get in front of Sainz for that P2 spot. And switching up a little bit with the tires was a big help. So a shout out to Mercedes. I think they really maximize their weekend. Maybe they won't feel that way with Antonelli behind a Williams still, but P2, P4, very solid weekend for them. Been kind of an up and down summer for Mercedes. Been a lot of times where they've been kind of not in the wilderness necessarily, but George has just been kind of quietly good, and then Kimi had his struggles. So to come out this week, P2, P4, very, very solid weekend, especially given the circumstances.
I was really hoping Kimi would get another podium. It looked like it was kind of shaping up for that, but like you said, I feel like the strategy, not saying that they were favoring George, but the strategy just ultimately kind of fell George's way, and not as much so Kimi's. But I still think he put in a pretty solid weekend. When you saw so many guys crashing out and qualifying and having mistakes and all that, Kimi, a rookie who's had his confidence a little shaken at times this season, I thought it was a good drive from him to just keep it clean and have pretty solid pace as well. But I was kind of hoping that he would get his second podium of the year, but that wasn't meant to be this weekend.
Yeah, it was a tough race figuring out who to root for the podium, because it was cool to see Carlos up there in Williams. Would have been really cool to see Lawson up there, just as someone unexpected to pop up on a podium. Yuki Tsunoda as well, after a really rough season he's had, and then Kimi, of course. So that 3 through 6 area there, a lot of guys fighting for that podium. Would have been cool to see up there. But yeah, I'm sure Kimi will be back up there soon, maybe before the end of the season. So, he'll get his time again.
Yeah. Moving on to stinker of the week. I was going back and forth on this one. I had made the decision to go Ferrari, just because I felt like they looked really good in practice. It felt like they had a car that was able to compete for a podium, maybe even a race win if things went their way here. But that was, that very much didn't happen. Hamilton out in Q2, Charles crashing in his favorite place in the world in Baku in qualifying in Q3. So, neither of those guys start up near the front. Hamilton actually is able to finish ahead of Leclerc, which for him is, I guess, a good sign. The strategy kind of favored him there as well, between the two Ferrari guys. But looking at it as well, I would have, thought that with, the kind of both the McLarens not being a factor this weekend, could have been a great place for Hamilton to get his first podium with Ferrari. That did not happen either. So just really felt like a lot of missed opportunities for Ferrari here this weekend. So I was going to go their route, but the more I thought about it, I just think this race was kind of a stinker. I felt like there was a lot that we could have gotten out of the race. Obviously, the storylines from Piastri and Lando, but other than that, I mean, once that was out of the way, it was DRS trains for 50, 49 laps the rest of the way. It was pretty difficult to overtake. I mean, there was some in the midfield, outside of the points, but most of the time you're focusing on the top 10 and what's happening there. And it felt like not much really changed there. It was difficult for, a guy like Lando to move forward because the DRS trains were so powerful. And, maybe it's not the track. Maybe it is. It feels like it should be really easy to overtake down that long straight in Baku. I know that you have, when it's a DRS train, everyone has the DRS, but you would think you'd be able to get past the guy in the front. With a straight that long, with that long of a slipstream, and then DRS on top of that. But that just didn't really seem to be the case for a large portion of this race. So I'm actually going to go kind of with the race as a whole. I don't want to say Baku because I like the track, but I don't want to say the car because we've had this car for 3-4 years now, and we know the problems that it has. But I just think that this combination should be primed for overtaking, similar to Monza, and neither of those places have really produced huge overtaking races in the last few years. And I just struggle to figure out why, and scratch my head every time trying to put that puzzle together. But I just don't understand it.
Yeah, so I'm gonna stick to my guns here. I think there's so many. Unfortunately, there's a lot of candidates this week. I think a lot of people would take either Oscar or Lando, or maybe McLaren as a whole. I also thought about Ferrari, but I saw in the doc that you had them, so I wasn't going to go with them. So I'm just going to stick with my guns here, and I'm going to say Alpine for two reasons. One, because they finished, bar Oscar, they finished dead last, 18th and 19th. Certainly not ideal. And then this tweet, did you see the post they put out after the race?
No. What did they say?
It's a picture of the car on track, and it says, "With our current package, we know the last few races will be tough. Time to see out 2025 and keep pushing back at base." So they're putting out a formal surrender. For the rest of the season.
Raise the white flags. Holy crap. That's
So
unbelievable.
I don't think it really gets any more. It's a stinker of the year right there. Not even really the week. That's
unbelievable.
Yeah.
They said the final races will not suit our car very well.
They just said that was the words. With our current package, we know the last few races will be tough. So, yeah.
Oh my gosh. I don't think I've ever seen any sports organization just like flat out say it's going to be bad, like for like the end of a season here. Like just openly state it.
I do find that like European centric sports like F1, they're a little more honest about their chances. Fair. Like every American team will be like, our goal is to win the championship, and F1 teams will say like, our goal is 6th place or something. But just to come out and say like, yeah, we've got nothing, we'll see you next year. That's a new level of like brutal honesty, which I kind of respect, but just to say that openly is
you hear the team principals and stuff say like, yeah, we might struggle at this track, or we know this season's going to be tough on us, but from like a social team to put that out, I feel like you just don't really see that level of like, yeah, we're not going to be good. Usually the social team is always like, hey, we'll get them next week. We put out a couple quotes like, yeah, we learned some stuff from the race, and we're gonna try and fight to the end here. But to just flat out say we're not gonna be good for the rest of the season from like your what, Twitter account manager? Was it a Twitter post or like Instagram or?
It's Twitter. I don't know if it's on the other socials, but I'm looking at it on X. formerly known as Twitter right now. So
Oh my gosh, that's wonderful. Well, if I would have known that, I definitely would have put Alpine as well. Now I feel
yeah,
dumb.
it would have been very easy to just go like a rough race. We'll get him next time and tweet out the graphic. That's all you have to say. But yeah, this is
I
where
thought
we're
you.
at.
Oh yeah, I'm looking at their Instagram. They said the same thing, and then
Yep.
they followed that up with a post of a tweet from Pierre Gasly that said, "No pace this weekend. Very difficult track for us. Let's work for Singapore next." And their comment was,
Yeah.
"We keep going."
Yep. They got the same thing on Twitter too. Just
Oh my
putting it all
gosh,
out
that's
there.
incredible.
We have no pace.
That's awesome. Well, I mean, I think that's all you have to know about the whole Alpine thing. Wow.
Yeah.
I don't know where to
We'll
go
see
from
it.
that.
Yeah, we'll just listen to their advice and see what comes next year. See if they can keep pushing back at base and deliver like a 10th out of 11 car next year, maybe.
It'd be pretty sick if Cadillac came in and beat them their first year. I mean,
Yeah,
I
it's
Cadillac might not be last year. I don't know who knows how good they're going to be, but that would be pretty sick.
yeah, they could do a Braun and come in and just win it in the first year. I'm
If they
not
do that,
projecting that, but
they should stop the team. If they do that, they should have no more seasons.
yeah, just like Braun did, just call
Yeah,
it right there, sell it to somebody
yeah.
else.
Jeez.
I'm with you.
Well, hard to top that, but we'll continue with some other stuff. We had a little bit more Hadjar to Red Bull rumors just from the week. I saw someone like kind of flat out asked Hadjar like, are you going to Red Bull next year? Or do you have anything signed? And he said no, and I don't know where I'm going to be driving next year. So it's kind of still up in the air, but there's a lot of questions that come with this. I mean, is Hadjar obviously? I feel like if you're Hadjar, you don't turn down the opportunity to go, advance your career at a team like Red Bull. But should Red Bull be doing this in the first place? Because we've seen what it's done to some of their young drivers, bringing them up too early to that team. Lawson, Gasly, Albon, all those guys who have turned out to be pretty good drivers, but really struggled in that Red Bull car. But if you look at it, I mean, maybe it doesn't matter because guys with experience, Yuki has had multiple years of experience now, and he's still struggling with the cars. Perez in his last couple years struggled with the car. So, maybe they're just looking at it as, hey, maybe if we just throw enough guys at it, one of them will adapt to the car well enough and stick. But it is a risky game, kind of taking that chance with one of your young, talents that looks really good right now. Could be, kind of a future, building piece for your team, to kind of maybe shatter his confidence like that. So, that's one piece of it. Also, what happens to Sonoda if that's the case? Who takes the other Racing Bull seat? There's just a lot to take from that if this move happens. So, just kind of wanted to get your thoughts as well on, what the future would hold for all of those different pieces. If Red Bull decided to make a move for next year.
Yeah, I think it's a really fascinating spot for Isaac because it's so tempting to try and go to Red Bull and be that guy. It's like being the guy to fix like Manchester United or the Cowboys or something like that. Not quite the same because they've got one really good driver, but the idea of like this cursed position at a high team, like you got to go for it. You got to give it a shot. And I don't really know if there's a world where like the Red Bull could come to him and be like, the seat's yours, and he just says no. Like I don't know if that would even be an option. I think that he's as ready for it as you're gonna get. I mean, I don't know if another year on Racing Bulls would really, I guess, maybe give him a little more experience, but I don't know what you do with the Red Bull seat for a year because there's just such a massive gap. I know he did better this week, but there's such a massive gap between Max and Yuki that I don't really know how you can keep that going for another year. Um, and then when you bring up Isaac, I mean, Lawson staying at Racing Bulls makes sense. He's adapted pretty well there overall since his demotion, and I think another year of that could maybe get him in the right space to eventually move on somewhere else, because I wouldn't see him back in Red Bull unless it's an emergency. Um,
Yeah.
and then, your last seat, I think it kind of has to be Lindblad, or maybe they bring in someone else from outside the Red Bull family. Usually they're not keen to do that, but I think you can't really, there's a difference between demoting someone like Lawson, who's still like technically kind of a rookie, and someone like Yuki, who's been in the sport for 4 or 5 years now and has so much experience. There's really no point in demoting him if you're counting it as a developmental team. I know they just had Ricardo as a driver for like a year and a half. So, but at the end of the day, it's supposed to be a developmental team, and it kind of goes against that to bring Yuki back into the fold there. So, unfortunately, I think he's the odd man out. I think he would be potentially a suitable driver somewhere else. Someone that could come in and do a good job, but I just don't really see a spot for him on either Red Bull team after this year.
Yeah, the Ricardo thing's a little bit different because he, left Red Bull many years prior, on his own. He went to Renault, obviously, did pretty well there for a few years, but then the McLaren stuff, he struggles there. He's kind of looking at V-Carb at the time as a way to, kind of revive his career, to rebound and make a comeback to the main Red Bull team. Whereas Yuki here, it would be a direct demotion with, really no chance, I would think, with his experience of, moving back up to Red Bull. I think that they would opt for someone younger, like you said, like Lindblad or somebody, and it probably would be Lindblad given their, like you said, they want to try and keep it within the Red Bull family. So that would make the most sense to me. Then Yuki, who knows what happens there? Maybe he ends up at Aston Martin one day with the Honda thing. I think it would probably, honestly, maybe he slots in there as a reserve driver for a year or two when they wait for Alonso to retire, or another spot to open up if Stroll decides he wants to go, spend his life another way, and doesn't want to drive an F1 car anymore. So maybe that's how it goes. But I would expect Yuki to not be at either team next year, just given the current momentum of the way things are going. And then, probably Lindblad takes that spot. And then Hadjar, like we said, he's not going to say no if he gets asked to move up to the main Red Bull team. Isn't the best thing for his career to move him up at this particular moment? Who knows? But it's worth a try, and you're not going to say no in that situation.
Yeah, that's the thing. You're not going to say no. And I think with Yuki, going back to that, I think the issue for him is that Aston Martin is the spot, but there's no seat. Like like you mentioned, they're not going to fire Alonso. They're not going to get rid of Alonso to bring in Yuki Tsunoda.
Yeah.
And, they're not going to get rid of Stroll for anybody, really. I don't know if they get rid of Stroll for Max Verstappen, frankly. So I think we're kind of at the crossroads there, where he's got one natural spot at the Honda team, which is now Aston Martin, and there's just nobody there. So I think that reserve role makes a lot of sense. That's got to be like the most natural landing spot. I think another team could end up snatching him up as well for a reserve role, if not Aston Martin, Honda. But that's kind of where I'm at right now. Is that's my projected spot for Yuki, I guess. Unofficial projection.
Yeah, that makes the most sense. I kind of see him wearing the reserve driver kit for 2026 for Aston Martin, just given the way things are going right now. And Alonso, the rookie, he can't drive forever. He's gonna have to maybe cut his career a little bit short and make way for Yuki at some point. Um, despite his persistence to keep driving that thing until he's like 75, it's just not going to happen. So eventually that seat will open up. And I would assume if Yuki's the reserve driver there, he would take that spot, unless they're able to get someone like Max or something to come over. Wouldn't that be brutal if you're Yuki and you wait a couple years as the reserve driver, and then your former teammate just comes and takes the spot right from you? Anyways, that would be brutal. But our last thing here, a little bit of Cadillac corner. Cadillac has added, another sponsor for their car next year. For the team, they already had Tommy Hilfiger announced, but they're adding Jim Beam now to their sponsorship lineup. I just think with the colors of Cadillac, right? They already have the blue, the red, and kind of the gold, silver, black, and then Tommy Hilfiger, red, blue, white. Jim Beam got the red, got kind of the goldish yellow, got the black. I just think this car is suiting up to be. It has the potential to be one of the best looking cars we've seen in a long time. I think Cadillac truly has the opportunity to do something great with a livery here in their first season, just with the color combo, all of their sponsors kind of lining up so far in terms of color. I'm really liking the direction that this thing's going as in terms of a livery. Who knows how good they're going to be, but I think they might have a really sick looking car next year.
Yeah, it's interesting. They've on the announcement, the car is black, and I don't know if that's going to be official. I think it would be. I don't think they're going to leak the official livery yet. But I do think no matter what color it is, I think we're going to get potentially a really special car. I am interested to see where they go color wise and kind of how it looks, because it's not very often you get the opportunity to start from scratch on something like this. Usually there's at least some concept of here's our colors, here's what we do every year. Maybe we switch it up a little, like Mercedes going silver or black kind of thing. But they have a real opportunity to start from scratch and do something new, and I'm very excited. Jim Beam makes a lot of sense as a sponsor. It's kind of as American as it gets for Jim Beam and Cadillac to work together. So maybe Walmart and McDonald's are next, but for now, Jim Beam's a good start on that corner.
I do like the juxtaposition of Tommy Hilfiger, which is it's not like a posh brand, but it's you usually wear Tommy Hilfiger if you're at a semi nice event by the beach, whatever kind of thing, and then Jim Beam whiskey, adding those two. I just love kind of the juxtaposition and the contrast of those two sponsors, but both very, both American brands, and they're kind of seem to be going down that route of American brands, but very, very different American brands in that, in that aspect. But I just think it's setting up for a great looking car. And like you said, they add a little bit of McDonald's, golden arches in there, a little bit of red from that. Who knows how good this car could look? It could be McDonald's, Jim Beam, Tommy Hilfiger, Cadillac F1 team. I think that should be the official name if they can score someone like McDonald's on there and just make it a sick, just like 15 sponsor long name.
Yeah, I think there's one company they need to steal, and that's Sunoco, who right now they work with Sauber, and Sauber's sponsorship page is just it's all foreign companies, just from all over the world, random companies for the most part, and then Sunoco just kind of sticks out like a sore thumb. And we've seen at the Sunoco gas stations over here, they'll just randomly be kick Sauber signs. Just pop out of the blue. Maybe those will be Cadillac signs next year, but Yeah, I would love to see them kind of do a tour of American sponsors here and really just play it up.
Yes, Sunoco, similar colorway. Obviously, they're like iconic with NASCAR and like American motorsport in that sense too. So it would be a very good brand to have, added if they could, pull something like that in there as well. That would be pretty sick.
Yeah, maybe they should just be sponsored by NASCAR. Just put the NASCAR logo on the side of the car and everything.
NASCAR Cadillac F1 team.
Yeah, that's how you get the crossover audience right there.
Would they take two NASCAR? Maybe they'd use it as like if you win the truck series, you get one of the F1 seats for the next year.
That would make the truck series pretty exciting.
Corey Heim
down the stretch there,
future F1 driver.
I'd love to see it. At least give
That
him a
would be great.
practice session or something.
Heim time. I love it. Oh man. All right. Well, I think that's everything for this week. We've gotten to the point where Corey Heim is taking the Cadillac F1 seat for next year. So I think that'll do it for this week's episode. We'll be back after the next race in Singapore to wrap up there. Should be another good race. It might not have the most overtaking, tight track, but the qualifying session should be pretty fun to watch, and there's always a chance of weather or something crazy happening at Singapore as well. In a couple weeks' time, that'll be a big race for the championship as well.
Absolutely. We're looking forward to it. That's another one that can be very hit or miss, but I think we're going to be in for a good one this time because there's a lot of storylines for sure.
Yeah, for sure. That's everything for this week. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Yep. See you soon.